When did a feeling of we need to get out of here immediately save you? Not my feeling, but whatever. It was at the Goose Fair in Nottingham in the early 2000s. I was there taking pictures for my art course and my BF at the time fancied himself as a bit of a hardman. Liked to make out he was trained or whatever. Anyway, after about 20 minutes he made me leave. Said that it was about to go down. Huge eye roll. Whatever dude. Okay, we'll leave. I see in the news the next day that a 14-year-old girl was shot dead there not long after we left. I was riding my bike during a huge storm when I was 10. There was this huge, recently built brick concrete wall right beside the sidewalk where I was using as a racetrack. I was having a good time and suddenly I felt that get the duck out of here. Which I did. The next morning as I passed by the place I was playing previously, the entire wall had collapsed. I was at a house party in high school and things were getting very rowdy. Tons of people just trashing the place. And I just had a bad feeling. Told my friends we should leave but none of them would listen. I remember going out to my car and as soon as I got in the cops pulled up. I ducked down and waited for them to get up to the front door and just drove off without them even noticing. Several of my friends spent the night in jail or hiding in the woods that night. I slept in my comfortable bed. I made a somewhat late night trip to a convenience store that I knew carried wine. I used to work really odd hours and sometimes late at night I'd finish my work and want to have a few drinks. As I was getting back in my truck this young girl asked if I could give her a ride a few blocks back to her home. It was probably a bad idea to judge a book by its cover but she was pretty young and dressed decently. Didn't act too weird or anything so I figured okay. Well, I'm heading back and we get into a pretty rough part of town and she says turn left up here. Very dark street. Whatever. I stop and she says she really appreciated the ride and wanted to do something for me. Asked if she could give me a BJ. I decline and start getting sketched out. Like, she needs to get out now. She gets out and closes the door and as I drive away 2 men dressed in dark clothing were just stepping towards the street and stared at me as I drove past. Pretty sure that would have ended with a gun in my face. That's what you get for being nice sometimes. What just seemed like a bad storm had started. My ex then decided to play with the dog out in the backyard in the rain. I got a weird feeling about how strong the winds were and despite being called crazy I told my ex she and the dog needed to go down into the basements for shelter with me. Within 15 minutes half my roof was gone. Apparently the storm was a derecho, which I'd not even heard of before that. Not me, but my mother. She was on a business trip taking a taxi from the airport and she noticed the driver wasn't taking the route usually taken as she had done this multiple times before. She asked him first out of curiosity. Perhaps there was a road closure or something. The guy simply mumbled something and mostly ignored her. Then it's more apparent they weren't headed toward the hotel and instead away from the center of the city. She got more and aggressive, eventually demanding he stop as he kept ignoring and mumbling something. Finally she got loud enough and threatening enough that he did pull over and she got out. She had a cell phone but smartphones weren't a thing yet. She was able to call a taxi service and get someone else to pick her up and sure enough they were headed nowhere near her hotel. Now maybe this guy was hoping he could take an ignorant tourist on a joyride and rack up some high fare. But it sure has the feeling of something far more malicious in the making. I was getting a beer with a friend and he brought along his friend. When we left I felt very drunk despite only having 2 drinks. They wanted me to come to their hotel as they were getting ready to go to a concert that night but I made the excuse that I needed to get home because I think I left my oven on. My beer was 100% tampered with. My vision felt like I was in a tunnel. I got home in an Uber and immediately threw up and continued to do so for the rest of the night. Up in the woods. About 2 AM. Having a very large bonfire in midwinter. There were probably 7 or 8 feet of snow where it wasn't packed and my friend and I were the only 2 sober. After about 45 minutes we both looked at each other at the same time and went, something is wrong. Neither of us could quite explain it because we hadn't seen anything. But we knew there were animals in the woods. Grizzlies, wolves, and bobcats are all known to be there but generally leave larger groups and fires alone. We managed to convince the roughly 15 drunk guys to head back to the trucks a mile away. As a group, Knowing at least the sober friend had a gun on her and could use it, we got everyone into vehicles and everyone shipped back to town eventually. When the guys who didn't believe us went back out in the morning to check that everything was cleaned up and found the tracks of a pack of wolves that had been circling the clearing. Decided to have a look at a culvert covered stream that I hadn't been down before. We weren't expecting it to be much, so no safety call out, weather check, or even bother to let anyone know where the entrance is. Get about 750 meters in, and my buddy notices a load of water pouring in up ahead. We look at each other and go, we need to get out now. In under 5 minutes, the water went from ankle deep and manageable to knee deep and almost pushing us over. We reached a section with some steps, a ladder, and a handrail for inspection, and managed to push the lid off with the water getting deeper every minute. If that ladder had been 10 meters further, we might not have made it. If we'd have slipped, dead. When we got out, it was raining gently. We were soaking wet, and just looked at each other with that oh duck look. A bit more above ground exploring, and we worked out that the culvert went under a local canal. If we'd have slipped, we'd have ended up in a sump under a canal, and likely never made it out. Nobody knew where we were, what was happening, or how to find us. In all likelihood, the only time they'd know where we died is when our corpses got spat out into the nearby river. A combination of stupidity and stupid good luck, I guess. This was back in 2019. I was in college and there was a really nice guy in one of my classes. A week or two in we had to work together on a small project and I was pretty excited about the opportunity to get to know him. After speaking to him, though, I got a really bad vibe from him, but nothing specific that I could put my finger on. I lost all attraction to him and knew that I should keep my distance. He approached me a couple of times after the project, but I made sure to be pretty cool distant, though still polite. A month or two later, same semester, our professor, Mr. Baldwin, announced that the guy had been arrested for murdering a girl he had been dating, another student in our college, and apparently it was an extremely brutal murder. He gave us the number of the detective investigating the case in case we had any info to share. Edit. Thanks for the wholesome award. I forgot your name now, but I have it in the comments. Lived in a rough place and have been robbed many times before. Usually a bunch of guys asking for spare change then threatening for your wallet. Anyways, I came out of a club at 2 AM or later and waiting for a bus in a deserted area with a friend. See a bunch of dodgy looking guys you could tell were up to no good. I instantly get the feeling, but rather than run and have them chase me, I walked straight to them with a bit of a crazed look and asked them for spare change. When they said no, I insisted. They left us alone. I'm not a big or threatening guy by any means. This was one of my proudest moments more than 20 years ago. A couple years ago, I was walking home from the bar at 1 AM. I'm a young woman in her 20s, so this was instantly stupid. But I wanted to save money avoiding an Uber, and was also drunk, so I wasn't thinking straight. I'm walking down a main but dark street, and then a pickup truck driving by slows down next to me. Two men look at me and the passenger asks, "Hey, do you need a ride somewhere?" I lie and say no thanks because I'm expecting one in a moment. They said alright and drove off. I watched them drive down the street and then, a ways down, I saw their brake lights light up. There was no stop sign or stoplight, so I just assumed the worst and thought, I've got to get out of here. I ran into a tiny parking lot to my right and hid behind an outdoor vending machine. Moments later, the two men pulled into the lot and circled it, clearly looking for me. When they couldn't find me, they drove away. I waited a few moments until I decided to call an Uber. Not to get out of here, but I can't leave this like this. Moment. My GF and I had just picked up a bunch of metal fence posts and stacked them in the back of her car. As we neared being done, I had a flash of panic, realizing that the points were aimed right at us if we got in an accident. So I turned the whole pile to be cockeyed so it wouldn't be dead on. On the way home we hit construction. We stopped at the giant flashing traffic light. The guy behind us didn't. We got rear-ended by an SUV doing 60 plus. I instantly had that same flash of panic and looked over at my GF. She was fine. I looked down. I'm fine. Look in the back. The fence posts are firmly wedged into the sides of the car after being slammed forward by the rear end crumpling. We were hiking and geocaching up in northern Michigan, where it's pretty rednecky in spots. We were at a designated trail with a small parking lot off on some weird side road, but we decided to check it out anyway. About 5 minutes into the trail we noticed a game camera, but there was no ID on it. Game cameras on public land need to have ID info, and we thought that was really strange. We kept walking a bit, but I just didn't feel right about the camera or walking on this trail. So we turned around and went back to the truck instead of walking the last mile of the trail. When we got back to the truck, this beater pulls up with a couple in it. The guy was just a regular redneck, but the girl in his passenger seat 100% had the nods and was struggling to keep her head up. He looked surprised when we walked out of the trail, and they sat in the lot for a second and then left. Pretty sure they weren't looking to go for a hike. My guess is that was their camera and they get the notifications when people are on the trail so they can break into their cars. It happened to us on a family trip in Kentucky years ago, so maybe I'm just a little suspicious. But we decided no more backwoods hidden nature trails for us. This is one of those strange events, and I just put it down to pure luck more than anything else. A few of my friends were leaving a house party one night. This was ages ago, when I was in my early 20s, and we were all on the road just having fun. Some of us were inebriated, and some of us were just high on life. I suddenly got an urge to get off the middle of the road. This is a narrowish one-lane side road, for apparently no reason. I am about 220 pounds at 5 feet 8 inches. Physically pushed 3 girls off the road with my arms spread and got to the grass bank on the side of the road. The girls were just about to start complaining about me manhandling them when an idiot teenage driver sped past us in a decked out cheap sports car. We would all have been mowed down if I didn't push everyone off the road. I wish this story ended there. Not even 5 minutes after he went past us, the driver of that car had swerved to avoid a stray dog on the road and had crashed at around 80 miles per hour into a stone wall. He was apparently 15. The minimum driving age in my country is 18, and was the son of a millionaire. This story starts like that but then ends up the opposite. I was on a bus in Romford, UK, and this guy was wasted, talking to everyone and being weird. My mates had a feeling things were getting dangerous, but I didn't feel it. We got off. Here's where the story goes bad, because at 18, I was an idiot. As the bus pulled away I shouted something dumb at it. Imagine bus wanker, but pre the in-betweeners, so probably not that good. The bus was moving and suddenly the fire exit door at the back of the bus flew open and the otter drunk rolled out the door, hit the ground and started running towards us holding something. I can't remember if it was anything dangerous or if it just looked dangerous, in his hand. All red-faced and angry. We scattered in different directions. I joined a queue to pretend I was going into a club. Some guys went down an alleyway. The drunk went around the street shouting for us, me, to come out and face him, and even approached the queue I was in, searching it like something out of Jurassic Park. I kept quiet, and after what seemed like forever, he turned and walked off down the road towards where the bus had been to see if we were there. All of my friends were understandably furious with me when we caught up at our destination. The 2 that went down the dead-end alleyway were convinced he was going to kill them if he found them. Nearly 20 years on, they still rid me about my lack of awareness and how ridiculously dumb I was. We got very lucky. Took my friend out for a drink. First time she had been out since having her daughter 12 weeks earlier. At around then I went to the restroom. Came back to find her having shots at a table with this random dude. Random dude looked at me and I felt flayed alive. Nothing in his eyes but malice. I grabbed my friend's hand, said loudly, "We are leaving now." We left immediately. I went back the next day to pay the tab we walked out on, and the bartender told me that same man was arrested for attacking a woman outside of the bar. Was on my first solo road trip to the US when I was around 34, male, straight. Stayed in a fairly remote Texan campsite and decided to go for a little trek. End up hitting a parking bay. It's about 4/5 PM. Nobody else around. Then some guy in his mid-40s rolls up in a van. Starts talking. All seemed normal enough until he asks if I want to go for a ride and a smoke with him. Politely declined. Then he said a bug went down my top. Without realizing I lifted it, and he then commented on having nice chest hair. Said I need to get back to my group and started walking in the opposite direction. Dude then starts reversing and getting a bit aggressive and insisting we go for a ride. I just got straight back to the trail and started running. No idea if he was just some strange friendly guy, potential thief, rapist, serial killer, or if I accidentally stumbled into a meetup place for gay men. Glad I didn't stick around to find out anyway. In high school, at a very shady friend's house, playing cards in the kitchen, one of the house residents comes running through and out the back door holding several illegal items. He's followed by the 2 roommates also carrying evidence with them, with 2 cops hot on their heels. The cops chase the roommates out the back door, but one cop stops briefly and tells all of us at the table don't move before heading out the back door. We're all stunned and look around for a couple seconds before all 4 of us, without a word being spoken, jump up and run out the front door to a neighbor's where we lay low for like 3 hours until all the noise passes. Me and some friends were in downtown Vancouver watching Game 7, Stanley Cup Finals, at a pub. Vancouver lost and things on the street got a bit rowdy. My friend wanted to stay and wait for things to come down, but I just had a bad feeling and said we should hop on the next bus to Kitsilano. On the way over the bridge I looked back and saw trails of smoke from burning cars coming from the city. A huge riot ensued and it was absolute anarchy all night. They shut down transit shortly after we arrived home. I had passed Amy Bishop, UAH, a biology professor, on the 3rd floor on her way to the faculty meeting where she executed 3 of our professors and attempted to kill more, as well as herself. She had always seemed weird and gave me chills. I was on my way out of the building, collected my things on the 1st floor from my previous lecture, and drove home to my apartment. I missed several calls on the short drive, having missed so many. The first I returned was to my mom, who was hysterical. She just kept saying you're alive, you're alive. I was bemused by what she meant. I said, should I not be? And that's when I learned people had been trying to check on my location due to the shooting happening. I suppose it didn't save me as I was not a faculty member, but it's the first thing that came to mind. It was extremely surreal to get home and realize so many people suspected I was dead. While having lunch in primary school, a strange car rolled up on our phys ed field where we were playing. A fat, almost naked guy was in the car. I started running real fast and so did my friends and everybody else. I pretty much started a domino effect of running and screaming. Safe to say that guy instantly sped off. Me and a buddy were hanging out with these 2 girls we met at a bar. They invite us back to their place where we meet up with a bunch more people. As the night goes on, the party winds down and a few people leave. Then one of the girls starts talking about having an orgy, and all of a sudden, the other girl is like, duck yeah, let's do it. Even in my drunken state, I still had the wherewithal to look around and count. At this point in the night, there's 9 guys, including myself, and 2 women. No matter how you divide that up, that's just too many D's. I decided it was time to go, but my buddy Tim was like, nah man, I'm gonna see how this goes. Tim essentially got excluded from the orgy and got to watch a bunch of dudes jerking off while these 2 chicks went back and forth giving them sloppy, drunk blowjobs until he also left. When I was 14 or 15 we had a class trip to a well-known beach a couple of states away for a long weekend. One night, I was walking with 3 other girls down the main part of the city and a man approached us, asked if we liked tattoos. We all said yes and that we would love to get one, but that we weren't old enough. He said, oh, we won't worry about that. My guys do tats for anybody, as long as you don't tell on us, and dropped a wink. That's when I started feeling a little leery. He led us down an alley to a little hole in the wall place with a big metal door. When he opened the door, there were about 5 guys in there with no light except for a little red light. My whole being said, get the duck out now. I screamed run, and I ran until I got back to the hotel. I'm ashamed I never even looked for the other girls until the next day. A few days later, our class was shown a newspaper article that showed the guy that approached us along with several other men. They were arrested in connection with a 6 trafficking ring. Our 14-15-year-old selves were almost trafficked. When I was 14 I lived in a rural area and one of my friends and I would walk down some old quad bike trails in the woods. They lead down to a river and we would spend hours out there just doing stupid stuff. One day we got to the river and there was a car parked with some guys and one girl, all in their late 20s. So we turned around. One of the guys yelled for us. So we turned back around and he seemed pretty cool, so we talked to him for a minute. He told us they lost their cooler and that if we would help them find it he'd give $20. So we walked around the area about 20 yards or so down one of the trails. When we got back to tell him we didn't find it, he stuck his hand out for a handshake and something just told me to get out of there. But for some reason I shook his hand. He didn't let go after about a minute and kept looking in my eyes. Then I heard the click of a knife opening. I told my friend to run without breaking eye contact with the guy and he took a swing at my face with the knife. But I was able to duck then kick him in the balls twice before he let my hand go. I've never run so fast in my life. Luckily my friend and I knew the trails better than they did and we made it back to our neighborhood. My folks called the cops and they ended up catching the people. One of the cops drove me to the gas station next to the trails and had me point out which guy had the knife and I guess they took him to jail. TLDR. Almost got knifed in the face because I was a dumb teenager and didn't run when I had the chance. This was my mother's feeling, but it saved our lives. My brother and I were kids and lived just outside of an airbase. We had an appointment to see the on-base doctor, so we were driving on our way there. Mum got a very sick to her stomach feeling and turned around and left. Said she had a bad dream the night before about us getting shot at the hospital and couldn't get it out of her head. That afternoon, a shooter murdered a bunch of people at that facility we were going to. He was shot dead by police, I believe. Had we gone in, all three of us would probably be dead. Do not duck around when my mom has bad dreams anymore. My mom's bad feeling might have saved me as an infant. She was walking with me in a stroller down her suburban neighborhood street. She says she started to feel a tingling feeling like she was being watched. So she decided to turn around and head back home. A few streets later she noticed a car driving slowly behind her. The driver, a man, starting at her and me. She starts walking a bit faster and notices he drives a bit faster to keep up. So she gets really scared. Before she can start running, this is the 90s and she didn't have a cell phone. He rolls down the window and tells her not to run or stop because she's being stalked by a coyote. He saw her safely to our doorstep and then pointed out the coyote, who had followed us half a mile and looked rangy and desperate. It had been slipping from brush to brush looking for an opening. So glad for her intuition and the stranger's help. Edit. Thanks all for the awards and fun conversations. My dad is a truck driver and has always told me if you are on the interstate near a semi and smell burnt rubber, get away from them because they are about to blow a tire. One day driving to work I smell burnt rubber. There was a semi next to me so I sped up to get ahead of him. Next thing I know I see a huge crash in my rear view with one car going airborne and flipping. I called the accident into 911 and then watched the news and papers the rest of the day. Thankfully no fatalities, but it was nasty. The semi blew a tire and the car next to it in the middle lane swerved to avoid the tire fragments and hit the car in the far lane, causing it to flip. I would have been right in the middle of it all. Somewhat of the opposite. But this was over 15 years ago. I believe 2001 or 2002. My aunt had driven from Atlanta to pick me up for a week-long visit with my cousins. Everything seemed okay, though before we really got on the road, I begged her to stop at this gas station that still had full service. I was only about 13 at the time, but I really wanted to stop. It started to rain really hard while we were there, and I begged her to stay until she could see the road better. It only rained for about 6-7 minutes, and we were on our way. About 10 miles up the road, we hit the small town of Abbeville. We saw smoke in the air which alerted us to slow down. We pulled up to the only major intersection of the town to see it was completely leveled. There were road guards wrapped perfectly around trees. A long-standing factory was now reduced to rubble. Gas stations were gone, as well as the high school. We called 911. The dispatcher had us sit tight and look for anyone in trouble. She informed us that about 10 minutes prior to our call, a tornado had ran through and torn the town apart. What's scary to me was that there was no alarm or siren. The fact that we had made it there before any EMS always stuck with me because it could have been us. 2.